listening to a podcast created by the Minnesota Alliance for Geographic Education. Our mission is to help you understand your world better through geography. Dr. David Lanegren is a professor of geography at Macalester College in St. Paul, and he is the director of the Minnesota Alliance for Geographic Education. Dr. Lanegren will discuss what desertification is and why it is important. Students may want to have a globe or a world map close by and locate the places being discussed. Some podcast users may be able to view images as well as click on links in this podcast if you have the right equipment. Several Minnesota geography standards are addressed in this podcast. I'm Fred Kunze, a member of the Minnesota Alliance for Geographic Education.
On the margins of the arid regions around the world, there's a process that's called in English desertification, which of course means becoming like a desert. Now, there's really no great definition of a desert, and so there's no great definition of desertification either. But essentially it means a situation where an area that once was able to provide an environment for agriculture has changed so that the area is no longer capable of doing that. There are several places around the world where this is a major problem. There's also some discussions about what actually causes desertification. Is it the result of climate change? Clearly that's the case. If we look over the long period of the Earth's history, the Sahara wasn't always a desert. There's been major climatic changes over the millennia. But the interest is really not on that, but rather short-term climate fluctuations, the current discussions over climate change, and the role of agriculturalists and pastoralists, people who are making a living by grazing animals on the edges of the desert. And the one set of literature argues that the overgrazing of the vulnerable vegetation at the edge of the arid land, typically we would call that a steppe or short grass region. The overgrazing of that by sheep and goats, sometimes cattle, but mostly the blame is put on sheep and goats. They destroy the vegetation and by overgrazing, and the removing of the vegetation makes the land more susceptible for erosion and rapid runoff, and the soil area changes from a short grassland to a desert. Now, the difference between a desert and a short grassland, of course, is the density of the vegetation. That's one thing that's people talk about in the area in Africa between the Sahara and the Savannah, that southern margin of the Sahara Desert. There's another kind of desertification that's discussed in China very vigorously, and that's the expansion of the Gobi Desert, the actual movement of sand dunes into agricultural oases. Again, we're not talking about sand dunes moving into the irrigated rice areas of China. And the Chinese are very active in trying to find ways to stabilize the migratory sand dunes to keep them out of the areas they're trying to irrigate and the oases they're trying to develop. That's another form of desertification. So on the one hand, you have the desertification that's presumed to be caused by overgrazing, and you also have the desertification where the sand is moving, the sand dunes are being moved by natural forces into areas that humans want to farm. There's another kind of desertification which is the result of irrigation, and that's this type of desertification is based on the increase of salt in the soil. So when people irrigate in a high sun area, the water evaporates and leaves behind the minerals in the water that the water picked up as it ran over the surface of the earth. And if you do this for a long period of time, there'll be a salt crust or concentration on the surface of the soil, and this is an issue in Southern California, and in the Imperial Valley region around the Salton Sea. So we've got these three general kinds of desertification. It is a problem that when there's a climatic fluctuation, which, when there's some kind of changes in the distribution of rainfall, which has happened in contemporary times in Africa, the Sahara will move, the Kalahari will expand, and then if the climate changes and the rains come, it goes back the other way. But the real concern that most people focus on is this human-environment interaction where there is some reason to believe that overgrazing will actually cause the desertification of a region. Not everybody believes that, not everybody agrees with that position, but it's a widely held belief. One special case is the Aral Sea in Central Asia. This was an interior sea, not connected to the ocean, that has been drying up. And the reason it's been drying up is because the Soviets brought an intensive form of agriculture into the region, cotton, irrigated cotton. Basically, it was pretty simple. They took too much water out of the rivers and put it on the land to grow the cotton. The result was a shrinking of this sea and the creation of really a very dramatic salt desert, the salty sea bottom that has resulted from the diversion of the water. That kind of desertification is not common. That's a fantastic example of it, but it's a very unusual phenomena. But people worry about it where there's exploitation of the water resources, such as in the Colorado River. There's concern about there not being enough water in the river so that desertification will occur down toward the mouth of the Colorado as it flows into the Gulf of California. But again, that's an unusual example of desertification. The more widespread one is this boundary of the desert and the Sudan and the role of agriculture advancing into arid regions.
You have been listening to a production of the Minnesota Alliance for Geographic Education. Background music is courtesy of Jim Hogue of Decorah, Iowa. The Minnesota Alliance is a non-profit group of educators and other parties who are interested in promoting an enhanced understanding of our world through improved geographic literacy.